All right, everybody, welcome to the Bleav in Texas podcast. I'm your host, Cecil Shorts III, and we have a very special guest. A very special guest is 2 days away from the NFL draft, and who better to have on than Dalton Wasserman from PFF? He's the co-host of the PFF College Football Show. And Dalton, I was just talking to you before we started, like how I watched your mock draft last night. I don't know how many hours it was, but every single bit of it. You guys did a great job, man.
Oh, no, I appreciate it big time. I mean, we put out so many of these things because there's so many different scenarios and trade scenarios, and it feels like endless possibilities, especially in this class when you're talking about, after the first maybe 4 or 5 players, there is so much discourse and disagreement about this class and the range that all these players could go in. So it's going to be a lot of fun once we get to this weekend.
Yeah, Thursday, Friday, Saturday should be a ton of action, ton of fun. Before we get to the draft talk, because we got to talk draft. That's the biggest thing right now. This kind of leads to the draft talk. Give me your thoughts on the Houston Texans offseason. You traded Laramie Tunsil, you traded Kenya Green, you brought in CJ Gardner. That's awesome. But the offensive line is in question, and then you let go of Stephon Diggs. What's your thoughts on what they did this offseason?
Yeah, it feels like a little bit of retooling, right? And maybe even retooling the culture when you talk about a new offensive coordinator, obviously trading Laramie Tunsil, and they got a good amount of draft capital for him. But now it really needs the future needs to be centered on building around CJ Stroud. It's obvious through 2 years that he's a franchise quarterback. He's a borderline elite quarterback. I would have him in the top 8 at this point already. He's that good. And you saw even in the playoff game against Kansas City, he gives you a chance to win. You just have to build around him, right? So I think that's what the next year or two is going to be, is figuring out with the resources that they still have with him under a rookie contract, how to protect him, how to get enough weapons for him, especially around Nico Collins, who's already a #1 guy, and then just filling in the holes on this defense and building a complete football team that can compete for Super Bowls.
Okay, so let's put your GM hat on. Are you a guy that wants the best player available, or are you drafting by need?
I would go for the Texans. Certainly, I would go best player available. I know there's been a lot of people in a lot of mock drafts that go, they have to take an offensive lineman. They have to take an offensive lineman. And look, I get it. I get the need, but they also signed a lot of veterans. It's clear that they want to kind of Band-Aid their way through this year. Now, if their best player available is an offensive lineman, like for me, if it was somebody like Kelvin Banks that fell to 25, I would understand it. But I don't think they need to force it out of need, right? They have other needs at wide receiver. I wouldn't have an issue with them in the first round taking a wide receiver. Defensive tackle, somebody like a Kenneth Grant or a Walter Nolan. I think the biggest weakness on this team, or at least I should say on their defense, is their run defense. They have an elite pass defense with those edge rushers and that secondary, but I always go back to that Christmas Day game against Baltimore when Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson just ran all over them. They need answers to stop the run even more so right now in their defense, in the middle of their defense than they have. So I think they have 3 to 4 options in the first round, and to me, I'm not forcing an offensive lineman. I know that's the biggest need on most people's boards for the Texans, but they can still find that on day 2, especially in the interior, if that's what they're looking to fix.
Let me ask you this. What's the deepest position group in this class? Is it receiver? Is it O-line? Is it D-line, interior D-line? Like, what's your thoughts when it comes to that?
I think the two that stick out to me are D-line, both at edge and defensive tackle. I think especially if you want run stoppers at defensive tackle, that's absolutely there's a stockpile of them in this draft. So I think the Texans are in a really good spot to get run stoppers inside anywhere they want. There's a lot of edge depth too. There's a lot of really good pass rushers, a lot of really good even day 3 designated pass rushers who will see rotational roles. And the other one is running back. I've been saying, I think even teams that don't feel like necessarily they need a running back, you should still dip your toe into this talent, because there are so many guys. I think 20 to 25 guys who could at least be contributors at the next level in all sorts of different power backs, early down backs, pass catching backs. There's everything. So I even think a team like the Texans, who, they already have Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, but dip your toe in that water in this running back class because it's extremely good.
Man, I tell you what, I think offensive line's in need, of course. Playmaker at receiver or tight end, because there's some special tight ends in my opinion, especially early up in the draft that I'm gonna ask you about in a second. Even later in the draft, I love Harold Fannin Jr., but we'll talk about that in a second. Running back, you got Joe Mixon, but the closer you get to 30, the closer you get to that age of 30, right? And then if you look at today's offenses, it's about the 2 backs. What can that second back do? What can that second back? Can he receive? Can he be the first and second down guy if somebody goes down? So I love the points there. Okay, let me ask you some questions here about the offensive line. When you look at where the Texans sit at 25, I wrote some names down that I think may be there. Correct me if I'm wrong. In the probably the 20 to maybe early second round range. Okay. You got possibly Tyler Booker. You got possibly Donovan Jackson. You got possibly a Josh Simmons, and then you got Conley Jr. from Oregon. Out of those particular four guys, who do you think would be the best fits for the Texans if they don't trade up? Now I'm gonna say this: Nick Caserio is one of the guys that's going to trade and move and deal and get things done. He moves all around. But say they stay put at 25. Who do you think's the best fit out of those four guys?
I think part of it is tough to tell with Nick Caley, the new offensive coordinator, coming in. And part of it, look, and I think part of this draft class too is where you're drafting these guys. I would say if you're drafting at 25, one of those four players, my preference would probably be Josh Connerly. I have him one spot ahead of my tackle rankings than Simmons. I feel like Booker and Jackson are more second round guys to me, maybe even early second round. If they got either one of them in the second round, I'd feel great about them too. But at that number 25 spot, I would probably say Josh Connerly. He's really light on his feet. He's very balanced in pass protection, a little more of a finesse player, but I think you have a guy who's a stable pass protector, did a lot of good work at Oregon. Even if eventually they wanted to play him on the right side, I think his footwork and his athleticism and his technique will play on either side. So I think if you're talking about with the 25th pick specifically, I would say Josh Connerly, but Simmons, I understand the athleticism, the potential, the value there. I think his tape is a little bit inconsistent to me, but his good tape is really good. And those other two guys, those guards, I just think the second and third round is the sweet spot for interior guys. So if they were to get a Tyler Booker in the middle of the second round there, I'd feel fantastic about it. I love Donovan Jackson. I think he's just going to be a solid starter in this league. But as far as that first round pick, I would take Connerly.
Connerly, okay. So Connerly, you think is a guaranteed plug and play guy?
I think so. I think you're getting a real stable base in pass protection. Got to get a little bit stronger as a run blocker. Had some fun blocks, especially in the second level. Oregon ran a lot of gap scheme, a lot of counter sort of things in their run schemes. But I think as a pass protector right now, I feel best about the stable base that it gives you and his footwork especially.
You know what? You make a good point. We don't know what Nick Caley offense looks like. We don't know what he wants to run, right? He was a tight end coach in New England, tight end coach in LA, learned from tons of guys, won Super Bowls on both teams. So I think if they pick an offensive lineman, we'll have an idea of what they want to do in the running game per se, right? That'll be a fun thing to watch for the Texans. All right, you talk about playmakers. You told me, Dalton, you can't be sold on just linemen, right? We talk about playmakers. We'll get to D tackles in a second. But Luther Burden, Emeka, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, I'm not sure whoever else is on your mind. Who do you think will be in that 25 range and who would be a good fit for the Texans?
I think my favorite fit for them in that round one range, a true Z receiver who, can help out in the running game, and Nick Caley seeing what Cooper Kupp did all those years with the Rams as well. I think Emeka Egbuka, let's get him back with C.J. Stroud. I think you're talking about just a reliable, super reliable underneath route runner with fantastic intangibles, willing to block in the run game. I think when you think about that Cooper Kupp role with the Rams, the Amon-Ra St. Brown role with the Lions, right? Because they traded for a true slot in Christian Kirk. Now, I don't doubt that Luther Burden could play the Z and move around, motion around, do all those things. But he ran, I believe, 80% of his routes from the slot last year at Missouri, whereas Egbuka, he's got some inside-outside versatility, and I just love him because you watch him and you watch the role he played for Chip Kelly at Ohio State, and even previously before Chip Kelly, was all his years at Ohio State. He is a coach's best friend. He just does everything that you could ever want him to do in an offense in any role. He's willing to do it. He comes through in the clutch in big moments. He's a great possession receiver. I love his concentration in tight spaces. Just unbelievable when it comes to catching those passes, those tough balls over the middle in tight spaces. So I think Egbuka, of all those guys, I understand the element with Matt Golden and the speed and what he can do down the field, but I just love Egbuka's game. I think he's got an incredibly high floor, and he would fit in perfectly for everything the Texans want to do under Nick Caley in their offense.
I tell you what, if you add in him, if I'm not mistaken, his best year was with CJ in 2022. Like
that freshman year,
like 1,900 yards. I think he went crazy in the Rose Bowl game, like 300 plus yards in the Rose Bowl.
Well, that was That was Jackson Smith and Jigba that put up the 300. But
Oh, that was
Ibuka,
JSN.
that freshman year, he was unreal too. I mean, the crew that they had between Harrison, Ibuka, and Smith and Jigba was incredible. But that's exactly the role I'm talking about. That when you go back to that team, even as a freshman, Harrison was the X, Smith and Jigba is always in the slot, and Ibuka as that versatile Z receiver that wins in that like 5 to 20 yard range. That's the exact role I'm talking about, and we've seen him succeed in it since his freshman year at Ohio State. It's the same role he would play for the Texans.
That's a great point. All right, Texans signed Dalton Schultz before they extended him before the last season, if I'm not mistaken. Had a decent year. I think he lived under expectations. They signed back Irv Smith Jr., who had some good games here and there for the Texans in the spotty. They drafted Cade Stover, another Ohio State guy. We talk about Ohio State guys a lot today, which makes sense when you have who you have at quarterback. Just being honest with you. But if a Tyler Warren just happens, and I know you're a Jets fan, happens to get by 7, and happens, and I don't know if this is realistic or not, we'll see in a couple of days, and gets past the Colts at 13, will it be too much to go up and get Tyler Warren? Because I truly believe he can be a tremendous playmaker for any team, of course, but for the Texans especially, looking for somebody over the middle of the field, somebody a red zone monster outside of Nico Collins. Is that unrealistic? Am I playing NCAA? Am I playing Madden here? or is that cost too high?
I will tell you, the most unrealistic part of that is getting by the Colts. I don't think there's any way if the Colts got the miracle of getting him there at 14, I don't see how they wouldn't take him. He's perfect for their offense. So I think you would have to trade up that high above the Colts. If he were to get by the Colts somehow, some way, you would get a very sudden arms race for, oh my God, who's getting Tyler Warren? Who's going to get him? Why is he dropping? This whole, somebody would go. I don't know if it would be Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. I don't know if it would be the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton. Maybe Atlanta would take him at 15 to replace Kyle Pitts. I don't know what, but I think you would get an arms race. I don't think he's getting by 14. I will say this, to me, he's the closest tight end that we've seen to George Kittle in a while. When you talk about the after the catch ability, the ability to break tackles, the angriness as a blocker to go with it. I mean, the year he had at Penn State, he was their offense. I mean, they ran the football well, and even then, it was generally behind Tyler Warren, right? So he is that two-way tight end who can do everything for you and be on the field for all 3 downs. There's so often at other positions we talk about 3-down players. Tyler Warren's a true 3-down tight end that adds to your run game and your passing game. So look, if by some miracle the Texans ever did get him, if something like that did happen, it would change. I think it would change the entire dynamic of their offense. I do, especially in the run game. But, and adding more play action on top of that. Nick Caley is a tight ends coach, so I'm sure he's at least looking into the class going, which of these guys do I want? Who's primetime? And I can tell you Tyler Warren's primetime.
Well, what about Harold Fannin Jr.? We talked about tight ends, right? We're talking about tight ends right now. What about Harold Fannin Jr.? Bowling Green, MAC conference. I believe it's outside the Power 4, but in the biggest moments, in the biggest games, the top 25 games, Penn State, and I can't think of the other games, he put on. I think he averaged 141 yards per game. He's exceptional. Hold down. He led the nation with receiving yards and catches. Is that correct? 117 and over 1,500?
I don't remember about receptions. I know yards, yes, and he set the FBS tight end record for a single season in yardage. And you mentioned it, tearing up Penn State and Texas A&M was a big part of that. Yeah,
A&M. So do you see him? Where do you see him going? Because I've seen everything from him being the number 2 tight end, number 3 tight end behind Loveland and Warren, but I've also seen him fall to like 6 or 7. So where do you see him going? Is it like a 3rd, 4th round grade you have on him, or is it like 2nd, 3rd?
I actually put him I made my final top 100 the other day, okay. And I put him number 100. He was my number 100 prospect, and he's the hardest one to get a read on because the production is absolutely there. And you put on the tape and you go, man, this guy's a running back with the ball in his hands. He's breaking tackles. He's got enough speed to get vertical. He's getting down the seam. He's running corner routes for this Bowling Green offense that really didn't have a whole lot else working. He was the offense, right? And then there's the other dimension where I think we were expecting through this pre-draft process a little bit something closer to elite athleticism. And he's a good athlete, but he's very small and he's probably a B to B plus athlete. So that's the hard part for me to figure out is if the if the production just translates better on a football field than it would at the combine. And I got to see him at the Senior Bowl. I thought he had kind of a shaky week, especially when you looked at Elijah Arroyo had a great week. Mason Taylor had a great week. Terrence Ferguson had a great week. Seeing them side by side made me question it a little bit more. I still do think this is a third or fourth round type of prospect. I look at him in a very similar light to Jonnu Smith, where if you have him in the right role, this can be a productive player because he can do so many things with the ball in his hands. I mean, we've very rarely, outside of Brock Bowers even recently, seen missed tackles force numbers like Fannon's put up the last couple of years. I mean, with the ball in his hands, he is dynamic. And you mentioned it, he proved it against top competition, Penn State, a playoff team, A&M, a borderline playoff team. So, I think somebody's definitely going to take a chance. I would like to see him in a role where he can flex around a little bit more and maybe a team that already has a good blocker at the position, and you can free up Fannin to move around the formation. But it's the Jonnu Smith vision for me, and I Bleav he went in the third round or fourth round back in the day. Kind of a similar projection there.
And he had a really, not a breakout year, but probably one of his biggest seasons last year with the Miami Dolphins. Again, in the right system after all these years that he was able to get off like that. Okay, let's talk about D tackles, because you mentioned you cannot be sold on offensive linemen. You can't be sold on, you got to be best player available. If in your mock draft last night I was watching, Walter Nolan, Ole Miss D tackle, falls sitting right there. And you were like, hey, if I'm the GM of the Texans right now, I'm taking him. Talk to us about Nolan and any other D tackle that may be in that range that the Texans might be able to go in and draft.
So the interesting decision with the defensive tackle class is that it's so deep, especially with run stoppers. Do teams that are on the fence about it take those guys in the first round? Now, I Bleav if Walter Nolan gets all the way to 25, that is a guy I'm taking. He was second in the nation in run defense grade for us, behind Mason Graham last year, which says a whole lot, right? When you're talking about Mason Graham. And look, he was the number one recruit coming out of high school. He's always had a boatload of talent. It just didn't click all the way in his 2 years at Texas A&M. This year at Ole Miss, he looked like a different football player, and the potential is all there. And, and the quote Trevor Sycamore, our lead draft analyst, has had is, there are certain clips you look at this guy and you go, well, that's Jalen Carter. Right? Like, he's got that much physical talent to him. He was up there with Travis Hunter in his high school recruiting class. I think for some outlets, he was ahead of Travis Hunter in his high school recruiting class. And this year, you started to see some development as a pass rusher. His hands are lightning quick. I mean, you talk about lightning quick, 3-technique hands. Man, oh man, it's insane how quickly he gets off the ball. Even I remember him at the Senior Bowl too, when I was watching some of the D tackle position drills. His get off was different than every other guy there. It was just completely different level of quickness and talent. If he can continue to develop as a pass rusher, there is a chance that he is actually the best defensive tackle in this class. And I don't say that lightly, because I absolutely love Mason Graham. I think he's one of the 4 best football players in this draft. Walter Nolan's got a boatload of talent. He needs another year or two to develop. I'm not saying he should sit on the bench or anything, but it's going to take a little bit more time, maybe before he's really prime time, a superstar like that. But he's got that potential. And if he got to 25, I would really think about it.
Ooh, you got Will Anderson Jr. on one side, Daniil Hunter on the other. Then you put him in the mix. Oh, that would be. Ooh, Texas fans are probably on their seat right now. They can't be mad at that. We cannot be mad if they draft a guy with that much potential. Let's talk about the running back room. We mentioned, I mentioned Joe Mixon, as productive he has been in his career, as productive as he was last year. The closer you get to 30 and the more miles and touches you get, your value comes down a little bit. And I think if you can add a clear-cut number 2 back, Dameon Pierce is there, but he struggled the last couple of years, just not understanding. Or I put it this way, I don't know if he was patient enough in the zone scheme that they were trying to run. I don't know if he was a right back. He's more of a downhill guy, hit the ball. Hit that hole extremely hard. So when you look at their running backs, as you mentioned, one of the deepest, I love Caleb Johnson from Iowa. I love Devin Neal from Kansas. I love the guy from Tennessee. Oh, his name's Sampson. Is it Sampson?
Yep. Dylan Sampson. Yep.
There's so many backs that are in the 2nd and 3rd and even 4th round that I think that they may go after. Who are some guys? Because I think Amarian Hampton and Genty are the top 2, and they'll be well gone. And then you got Travion Henderson, who's getting some media attention that he may be in the first round. We'll see. I don't know if he'll be the guy. But rounds 2 through 4, who are your top backs and who you think will be available?
So I RB3 on my board, and I think he's going to go a little lower than a couple of these other guys. I love Cam Skattebo from Arizona State. I
Ooh,
mean,
really?
how could you not? Just a super hard runner. You talk about heart of a lion, man. Oh, nobody in the draft runs harder than him. Maybe Ashton Jinty. I mean, he just runs with everything he has all the time. But that's the thing is people think, oh, he's just this big power back that runs through people because he's just bigger and stronger than them. And he runs angry, but he's got great instincts. He's got great vision. The only thing he doesn't have is the big time 40 time. I get it, 4.65, but Kyron Williams ran a 4.65. Arian Foster for the Texans ran something around that back in the day, and he was a great back, obviously. So to me, Skattebo's instincts are off the charts. His vision is awesome. The power in his legs and the jump cuts that you get out of him are fantastic. And I'm going to tell you something that I hear nobody mention this. Fantastic. He's a great receiver. I'm telling you, he's the most underrated receiving back. He was one of the best receiving backs in the country this year, and just nobody talks about it because they look at him like, oh, this big power, just, Marshawn Lynch, Kyron Williams type of power back. He is a lot more versatile than given credit for, and I can see him being a 3-down back in the league. So he's awesome. The two backs from Ohio State, you mentioned Travion Henderson with the speed, Quinshon Judkins, just a real fundamentally sound, powerful runner too. Devin Neal's awesome. I love Damian Martinez from Miami. I mean, the yards after contact, I look at him in the same style. I look at James Conner, and I think he could be down the same path as Conner, where maybe early in his career he's a rotational guy and then eventually a starter. But there are so many. There's so many. I think there's good backs all the way through round 5 or 6 in this class. And again, every team in the league should be looking at looking into this class. And even if it's round 4, 5, 6, take one of these guys because they're extremely talented. You have guys that are going to go in the 5th round this year. They would have gone in the 2nd or 3rd round last year. I mean, it's just such a better class. You have to get into it.
All right, I'm pushing on the spot here. At 25, who are the Texans going to select? What's your gut tell you? What does your gut tell you, Dalton?
I keep going back to Emeka Egbuka.
Okay.
I think if he gets there, and I know his intangibles are off the charts and teams love him, but if he's there at 25, I think I'm going to go there. Collins, Egbuka, Kirk, Schultz, and then whatever you add, you mentioned if you add at tight end and at running back, you're still trying to build this thing around CJ Stroud. And I go back to that Chiefs game in the playoffs, and I just go, Nico Collins was the only guy. I need somebody else. All these great teams, the Eagles, these great offenses, the Eagles, the Bengals, these great teams, they have 2 of those guys. The Vikings with Jefferson and Addison, the Dolphins, even when they're right with Hill and Waddle, they have 2 of these guys. I'll say Emeka Egbuka.
Okay, Emeka. I like that. I think the majority of Houston, they either want 2 things. They want, and I argue people on Twitter, they want either an offensive lineman to block for CJ, or they want a playmaker that he can throw to.
I get it. Look, you have to. The smart thing to do at all times is build around your quarterback, and that is the argument I will tell you against a pick like a Walter Nolan or a Kenneth Grant, who great players, love them. But there's a lot of run-stopping D tackles. If I got in day 2 or day 3 and I got a CJ West from Indiana or a Jamari Caldwell from Oregon, one of those guys, they can fill that same early down role that I'm looking for. So there is an argument too. You know what? At all times, just build around CJ Stroud. A lot of these teams with young quarterbacks, the Jags, build around Trevor Lawrence, build around, you see what these teams have done when the Bills build around Josh Allen. Look what happened, right? Or the Bengals and Burrow and Hurts and all these young guys. Build around your quarterback. Let the rest fall in line. I get it.
All right, I got one more last thing for you. So I tried to do my best Dalton impression, and I made a mock draft last night. Just 3 rounds, right? 3 rounds. And I'm going to give you my picks, give you a little bit of reason why, and then you got to tell me, am I crazy? Whatever the case may be. You got me? I want a grade. I want a grade here, okay?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, so round 1, 25, we're going Tyler Booker. I know you have him later, but I'll tell you why I'm going to. I think he's plug and play at the guard position. I think when we look at the Texans last year, a lot of their issues came from the interior area, whether it was center, whether it was left or right guard. They struggled there big time. You're putting him there. He is so technically, or not, put it this way, he's nasty. His pass blocking might be better than his run blocking. So he's going to be solid when it comes to protecting your biggest asset, which is CJ Stroud. I love his mindset. So Tyler Booker, to me, would be the 25th overall pick. Now, going to the 2nd round, I'm going Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. Big guy, what, 6'4", 6'3", 215. I think he will be there. I think the pick is like 59. He'll be in that range. But he can be a guy that can play the Z, can play opposite of Nico. You got Kirk in the slot. I love his playmaking ability. So I went Jaden Higgins for my playmaker, and then I went all offense. So don't judge me. I went Devin Neal in the 3rd round. I love how Kansas runs different multiple run schemes, right? Different type of schemes all the time. And then you got a guy that's just able to catch the ball out the backfield. A tough guy, can run in between tackles, can go outside. He can do a multitude of things. So Tyler Booker 1, Jaden Higgins 2, and then Devin Neal 3. All right, give me your grade. Give me your grade.
I think I do. Here's what I'll say. I do like the reasoning. Let's start with Booker. I like the reasoning on Booker. And one thing I'll say with Nick Caley. So Sean McVay, the last couple of years, he was always known as the Shanahan outside zone stretch guy, right? Running all the Shanahan stuff. The last couple of years, he's gone to more duo. He's gotten more downhill. And if he's going to do that, actually, if the Texans were to take Tyler Booker at 25, we would know darn well what they're trying to do on offense now. They're going to bring that duo scheme with them over from LA, and they're going to get downhill, and that's where Tyler Booker needs to fit in. Look, it's not at all that I think Booker is some sort of bad value. I actually think 25 of the Texans might be about the top of his range. It's possible. It just depends on your run scheme. You're right. In pass protection, right now, his pass pro is ahead of his run blocking. But if you get him in a downhill scheme where he doesn't have to move too much laterally, I can see the case. So I actually like that pick. Jaden Higgins at 59, that's a spectacular value because I think there's a very good chance he's going in the top 40. If you take Higgins, maybe, he's bigger. He's 6'4". Maybe you think some people will go, well, you already have Nico Collins, and he's already kind of that guy. But if you were to get Higgins at 59, it would be surprising to me, but it would be a fantastic value. And then Neal's a guy I really like. I have him as my 9th ranked running back in this class, and it's only because it's a steep class. He may have been 3 or 4 in last year's class. Fundamentally sound, compact, right? When I watch him, that's a compact runner, fights for tough yards, can make guys miss one-on-one in the hole. So I'm going to give this probably an A-. And if we assume that the scheme is right for Booker, then I like that pick a lot. It makes a lot of sense. Higgins is a fantastic value. The only argument I might have a little bit is there's some 3rd-round defensive tackles that I really like. I'm telling you, especially in the even fronts that the Texans are running. They're always in 4-down fronts. CJ West from Indiana is a name to watch. That's somebody I've been taking in the 3rd round a lot. Defensive tackle it depends what you value and how you value the depth. But I think rounds 3, 4, and 5, we're going to be looking for the Texans. If they don't do D tackle in round 1, we're going to be looking at D tackle, depth at running back like you have for Neal. And I think one of these nasty blocking tight ends we're going to have early on day 3. I'd like to see a guy like a Jackson Hawes or somebody get in this tight end room because even by our metrics, their tight end room was one of the worst blocking units in the league. I want to see one of those blocking tight ends in round 4 or 5 for him too.
Hey, well, y'all heard it here. Dalton gave me an A- on the mock draft. Dalton, thank you so much for coming on. Make sure y'all check out his podcast, the co-host of the PFF College Football Show, and everything PFF does for Bleav. Thank you so much. Hey, please like, subscribe on all platforms to Bleav in Texans. That is it for today's show. And as always, go Texans.